Tico's Talk. I'm Tico, and this is my friend Eric. Today we're going to be talking about the wonderful game of squares. We're going to be talking about its mechanics, and we're also going to talk about the significance of the game. Alright, so now we're going to get into the basic mechanics of squares. First, you're going to want to have the dealer shuffle the cards up. Once the cards have been shuffled, each person will receive 4 cards from the dealer. The game consists of 4 people, no more, no less. Once each person has 4 cards, the dealer will place 4 cards in the middle, face up. Each player will look at their cards. Now, this game works off of having a teammate. So, your teammate is going to be the person diagonal to you. Okay? So basically, the point of the game is you drop 1 card, and you pick up a card from the middle pile. Each person can be doing this freely. So it's pretty much a mosh pit. People can be dropping their cards, trying to get the card you're trying to get. So as each person has agreed that the 4 cards in the middle are useless to them, then the card will be put into a trash pile and they can no longer be used. This is where the dealer will draw another 4 cards. So as the rounds go on, people are dropping their cards. The purpose is to have 4 of a kind. Once you have 4 of a kind, the whole purpose of the game is to call squares. But the catch is, you can't call squares yourself. Your teammate must call squares for you. And there's a lot more than just drawing 4 cards. And we're going to get into that in the next segment of this video. Alright, so now we're going to get to the fun part of squares, and the part that really makes this game fun and different from other board games. So, Eric and I are teammates, so just picture he is my diagonal person to me. Currently I have 3 of a kind. I have 3 threes, and then I have an ace. So obviously I don't have squares, but if you notice in the middle there's a 3. Eric and I both understand that when you put a fist on the table, that means I have 3 of a kind, yet he doesn't know what type of card I have. So from there, players can develop their own type of code name or code language. So him and I understand that Supra stands for 6. So what I'm going to tell my teammate is that I have Supra minus 3 and this fist here. So he now knows that I have 3 of a kind. So when the round starts, he's going to drop a card and he's going to pick up the 3. Alright? So then players are going to be throwing their cards down. The other team doesn't know that I have 3 of a kind. So then trash comes out, and the next 4 cards are put in the middle. So now Eric knows that I have 3 threes, and I have 3 of them. Right? So he's going to drop the 3. I'm going to drop my ace, and I'm going to pick up the 3. Now he knows that I have 4 threes. So what he's going to do, he's going to call squares. Squares. So that's it. We won the game. Alright, so from what you saw there, that's really a main part of the game, that it can really go any way. The type of code names that players develop or a team develops really can be anything. We've had players go against us that use Disney movies. You could use NFL players, NBA players, anything. And for example, if you call Winston, Winston has number 5, so your teammate can understand Winston as 5. From there you can add numbers, and there's also different ways to tell your teammate how many of a card you have. So this game really has a lot to it. There is more to it from just having code names. The other part of the game, which is the main part of the strategy, is watching what players pick up. So right here we have a 10, a cube, an 8, and a king. So you can notice from the first round that a player instantly snatches for a cube, right? Next round comes along, and he put a 4, a 6, a 6, and another cube. And then you notice that the player picks up another cube. So then obviously he can either have 2 or 3 cubes. So right off the bat, you know what another player can be going for as long as you're watching him. That is another skill to the game that is very difficult to attain, but it can be developed after a while, and it is good for players to have that quick noticing, like of what cards the other players are picking up. Also, if you look in the trash, you can tell that in the trash there's certain cards that you know that player is not going for. So from there you develop like an elimination. So from that example, you could totally tell that he's going for the cues. And then you could pick up on like cues that the other players are doing. You can pick up on their facial expressions, how they're acting, if their hands are moving. It all just builds up, and you can tell they're nervous. You can tell that they have squares. So then you can take a chance and call squares. If you do call squares and he has 4 of a kind, then you win that game for your team. So it necessarily doesn't have to be your teammate calling squares for you. You can call squares against the other team and you could win. Alright, another aspect of squares is pretty much hiding your squares, I guess you could say. And one of the strategies or a type of hiding or fake or a bluff similar to poker is a player can start dropping a card and switching it for another card and just continuing to do that in a round. So this can really throw off a player. So a person can drop a card, pick up another card, and then drop another card and pick up another card, and basically this is countering a player looking at what you're picking up. It can really throw them off. You could drop a card on top of another card, pick up the bottom one. There's a lot to it. A lot of players like to drop off 4 cards and then just from there scramble and get the other types of cards. So that's a strategy used in squares, and that's a big aspect of squares, which is the bluff part. Another part of bluffing in squares that you could use is a person can call squirrels. So you know when someone has squares. So there is times when you're playing this game that 2 people call squares at the same time. Obviously the person that called it first wins. So you could trick another player by having your teammate scream squirrels, or any word that is really similar to the word square. So if you call squirrels and the other person calls squares, then they lose because you don't have squares and they just call squares, which you can't do unless someone has squares.
Okay, here's a perfect example of the tournament bracket that you could use for squares. This is really beneficial for high schools, and this is the same type of bracket I used in my high school. So basically, this specific bracket accommodates 16 teams, 2 for each team. That means 32 people. However, you could make bigger brackets depending on the amount of people you have, or if you wanted to, you could even make a loser's bracket, and the winner of the loser's bracket can face the winner of the winner's bracket, and then that would be the championship game. But in this case, we're just going to have an elimination tournament. Okay, so another beneficial thing to this bracket that is really good for high schools and the high school setting in general is the fact that teams can be paired by what type of schedule they have. So in this case, Rob's squad is available to play squares at 1:30, and the Georgia Techs are available to play at 1:30 as well. Therefore, they are paired together initially. But eventually, there's going to be a conflict in which 2 teams may have a different schedule. So how to resolve this is to have the teams meet up during lunch and then they play the game. There is a tournament keeper, and the tournament keeper in our case was our favorite teacher, but anyone can really be chosen. The tournament keeper's job is to make sure that the teams are playing each other and recording the wins and the losses. This is a fun way to play squares because it makes the game a lot more exciting. There's a lot of competition and you never know what's going to happen. And towards the end, whoever wins just has bragging rights for that week. In our case, we held the tournament every week. It could be shortened to 1 a day or 2 a day, but this allows for more people to compete, a more exciting way, and is really, really good for the high school setting. As you've learned, there's a lot more to squares than just collecting 4 of the same type of cards. There's things such as code language, which allows your opponent to know what type of card you have and how many of it do you have. There's also card watching, and there's disguising and bluffing in order to counter card watching. And of course, there's a tournament system that works really well in the high school setting, but can be used beyond the school. So, Thank you for joining me in Tico's talk, and go out and experience squares for yourself.